Hi, I'm Adam Summer. You're listening to the Yerushalmi Talk podcast with the support of the Yeshivat Devar Yerushalayim in Har Nof, Jerusalem. This is Demai, Chapter 6, Halacha 2 in the Art Scroll 55b2. Now, today we're going to be covering this rite called the benefit of gratitude. That is going to be the right to give to whomever you want for your tithes to any Kohen that you please. Now, this tithe belongs to the tribe of the Kohenim in general. It does not belong to you. However, you have a right to give it to whichever Kohen you want. A Kohen cannot simply come up and just take it. Now, why is it that you have this right? Well, again, maybe you have a son-in-law who is a Kohen and you want to give it to the son-in-law and benefit indirectly to benefit your daughter. So we left off in part 1 of this shiur. This is part 2 of this shiur. We left off where Rabbi Yochanan is dealing with a proof text from the Torah, and that's over in Numbers 18:19. It says, "Everything that is set aside from the sanctities that the children of Israel raise up to Hashem have I given to you." And this would look like the Kohenim can take tithes by force, but that's actually not true. And the idea here that Rabbi Yochanan is pointing out, where he's saying that they shall be for him, this distribution of tithes is in the hands of the owner, and he is empowered to choose who the recipient is. And the idea is that, as Rabbi Yochanan says, in his view, it's teaching that the owner may give the tithes to any Kohen he pleases. And another point that Rabbi Yochanan has is he may not sell this privilege to someone else. That was the maloket at the end of part 1 of this shiur. Can you sell this privilege or not? Rabbi Yochanan holds that you may not. Now, the challenger to Rabbi Yochanan in the end of part 1 of this shiur was Rabbi Yosef, the son of Rabbi Hanina. And over there, he was saying that, yes, he has the right, but that's a sellable thing, that it's like a form of equity. And yes, that's very nice that you have that right, but like with other rights, they are sellable. That's not going to be the halacha. The Mishnah, says this Gemara, contradicts Rabbi Yosef, the son of Rabbi Hanina, and says if one said, this, by the way, is in the Mishnah. This is going to be in the Yerushalmi Nedarim 11.3, Bavli 83b. And it says like this. It says, that which Kohenim and Levim benefit from me is konam, in other words, forbidden to them. And the idea here is konam is used in vows, and that's a euphemism for like korban, right? Which means offering. And that's signifying that the object of this vow should be forbidden to somebody, just like sacred offering, once you've declared it to be an offering, becomes forbidden to you. So this Mishnah is saying that someone who says that which the Kohenim and Levim benefit to me is konam and is forbidden, basically this prohibits Kohenim and Levim from benefiting from those items and from getting benefit from him. It looks like Rabbi Yossi, son of Rabbi Hanina, would maintain that one is permitted to sell this benefit of gratitude of tithes, and this privilege would constitute a type of financial equity in the tithes. This Mishnah permits the seizure. That's what's interesting. The Mishnah is actually going to permit the Kohenim and the Levim from seizing the tithes. Now, that goes against what Rabbi Yochanan is saying. Rabbi Yochanan is saying that, the benefit of gratitude may not be sold. And so it looks like this Mishnah is contradicting this. What's going on here? The Gemara is going to explain exactly what's going on in Nedarim over there. And it's going to say, interpret the Mishnah as speaking about a case where the person who makes this vow says, I will not give a gift portion to any Kohenim or any Levim at all. In other words, he's saying, no, what I have in this house here with this grain, I'm not giving it away. I'm not doing any tithes. I know what the Torah says. The Torah says I'm doing tithes and that it belongs to the tribe of Levim. And I've made a vow and I'm just not giving away any tithes to benefit any Kohen or Levi anymore. Well, you didn't make a valid declaration. And in fact, you're infringing on their property. And what this is saying is that the vower is trying to forfeit this privilege of the benefit of gratitude, and you're denying the recipients of the tithes. So accordingly, they're going to say that, the Tanakh is going to say that you're allowed to go in as the Kohen or the Levi and seize the tithes. And by the way, that's not going to be a benefit that comes to the person who made that vow. And basically what this is saying is, this is a particular case where the benefit of gratitude does not apply because they've basically violated the Torah vow. The Torah vow, the Torah law, is that you're supposed to give tithes to the Kohen or the Levi. So you coming and making a vow that contradicts what the Torah says, well, this still belongs to the tribe of the Kohenim and the tribe of the Levim, and it's still in this guy's possession. And that's a case where you're allowed to come and to seize it. This is the only time that they're allowed to come and seize it. The only time. Now, by trying to withhold the tithes from all Kohenim and all Levim, what's happening here, says the Pnei Moshe, is the owner is relinquishing this privilege to choose the recipient. And since the tithes must be distributed, they may be seized by whichever Kohen or Levi decides to go and do it. And since the owner no longer possesses this benefit of gratitude, he is without a financial equity at all in the tithes. And this does not constitute the benefit of gratitude received from him by the Kohenim and the Levim. Therefore, the seizure does not violate the vow, nor does it violate Torah law at all. So that's a very particular case that this Mishnah is referring to. The rabbis are saying, look, if you don't allow the seizure of this property, the tribe of the Kohenim and the tribe of the Levim are never going to acquire this, because this guy is coming to violate Torah law. And so, as we were looking at the privilege that you may not sell to other people and give to whichever Kohen you want, is actually going to be a D'Rabbanan thing. It looks like it's going to be D'Oraita, but it's actually going to be D'Rabbanan. And so the Tanakh is actually going to withdraw that D'Rabbanan right, and that way it's going to allow for this particular Kohen or Levi to go and seize it, because otherwise, again, there would be no way to recover this property. Now, the Gemara is going to support this Mishnah. It's going to say that this interpretation of the Mishnah, and the Gemara says that you should know that this is so, for we learned in that very Mishnah that if the person who made the vow said that these particular Kohenim or these particular Levim benefit from me, is Konam to them. In other words, he specified specific Kohenim or specific Levim by name. The Gemara says, let others take the tithes. And in this case, the Kohen or the Levi who is named is going to be prohibited to receive the tithes, but everybody else in the tribe of the Kohenim or the Levim are permitted. And this is in contrast to the Mishnah's earlier section, which is saying that this person is coming and saying that all the Kohenim and all the Levim are prohibited to receive this person's tithes. So the section is talking about a vow that's aimed at every single Kohen in the world and every single Levim in the world. And by specifying the Kohenim and Levim in general that they may not receive the tithes, then what's happening is you have to look at this benefit of gratitude, and it looks like it has monetary value to the owner, and it looks like it's a forbidden benefit. And it would seem to contradict the Mishnah's earlier clause, which permits Kohenim and Levim to seize the vower's tithes. So the earlier clause concerning a vow prohibiting somebody to benefit to all Kohenim or Levim, and what would happen is this is going to, says the Pnei Moshe, result in the loss of the person making the vow to have this benefit of gratitude privilege. And so it's going to render the tithes permitted to the recipients. In other words, by the Tanakama coming and revoking this privilege, now there's no excuse for Levim or Kohenim not to come and take it anymore. Because before you could say, well, he still has some sort of interest in this possession of tithes because he can give it to whichever Kohen he wants. Now he's come along and he said, I'm not giving to any Kohen or any Levim at all. Well, basically what's happening is the Tanakama are coming, revoking the part that lets this person hold on to the tithes in the first place. And by doing so, now any Kohen or Levim can come and seize it. Now, the Gemara is going to challenge the view of Rabbi Yochanan, and the Gemara says that a Baraisa contradicts Rabbi Yochanan, and this is a Tosefta in 5:19, and it says that Yisrael may say to Yisrael, here is this selah for you, and in return, you shall give this Bechor offering of yours to my daughter's son, a Kohen. And in this case, it would look like somebody selling the right to choose the recipient of one Bechor's offering to another. And it looks like this contradicts Rabbi Yochanan's ruling. Rabbi Yochanan, again, goes back and says that the owner can give the tithes to any Kohen he pleases, but he may not sell this privilege to someone else. So doesn't this Tosefta contradict what Rabbi Yochanan is saying? But the Gemara is going to resolve this, and I'm going to give you the Rambam's very smart explanation about this. The Gemara says like this: interpret the Baraisa as speaking in a case where the Kohen wishes to give the Bechor to two Kohenim, one of whom is the son of the buyer's daughter. And the buyer says, here's the selah for you, and in return you shall give all of the Bechor to my daughter's son, the Kohen. And since the owner planned to give half the Bechor to this Kohen in any case, Rabbi Yochanan agrees that he may accept payment for giving the other half as well. And normally, Rabbi Yochanan prohibits the sale where it would not have been directed to any part would not have directed any part of the gift portion to this particular Kohen. The Rambam in Hilchos Trumos 12:21 has an understanding that's very smart. In his view, the owner intends to give the entire Bechor to one of two Kohenim, one of whom is the buyer's daughter's son, but he did not yet decided, this is again how the Rambam's reading this sugya, but he did not yet decide which to choose when he gives which Kohen to give it to. And then he's approached by the buyer. And since the buyer's grandson is already a candidate to receive the gift without payment, we regard the money paid as nothing more than an inducement to cement the owner's choice, and it's not an actual sale. And the Rambam points out that even Rabbi Yochanan would agree that it is permitted. So that's a very beautiful explanation for how this can be reconciled. Again, the Rambam's interpreting this Gemara as saying that he's already decided to make a choice between two Kohenim, and he's not really selling his right. This is really just an inducement to cement the owner's choice that he already did. It's not an actual sale. So the Gemara is going to continue, and we were learning that according to Rabbi Yochanan, the sale of the Bechor offering benefit of gratitude privilege is permitted only where the owner had intended to give part of the Bechor to this Kohen anyway. So according to Rabbi Yosef, son of Rabbi Hanina, the sale is permitted even where the owner had no such intention. The Gemara is going to explore Rabbi Yosef, son of Rabbi Hanina's permit. Again, Rabbi Yosef, son of Rabbi Hanina's point is this. He's saying that this benefit of gratitude that is a right that anybody has to give to whichever Kohen or Levi he chooses, well, that's going to be a sellable thing. It's like equity inside of the tithes. And over there in that Mishnah, Rabbi Yosef, son of Rabbi Hanina, would say, well, of course, the Kohen can go and seize the tithes when the person makes a vow to not give any tithes at all, because you've taken away this financial interest implicit inside of these tithes. And so now any Kohen can come and take it because there's no longer any interest of the person who's not the Kohen or the Levi having in these tithes. So it looks like Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Hanina's point, makes a lot of sense all of a sudden. So they're going to ask Rabbi Zera about this. And the Gemara says, in a similar case of selling the benefit of gratitude of a Bechor offering, where it was a Kohen giving money to a Yisrael, that what would Rabbi Yossi, son of Rabbi Hanina, say? In other words, the same kind of case. Would he allow this transaction where the purchaser is a Kohen, or only where the purchaser is a Yisrael? And so it's going to go like this, says the Mara Fulda. This is what the Gemara means, according to Mara Fulda. He says that the cases where the owner has no intention of giving any part of the Bechor to this particular Kohen, and he did so only because of the money he received from the other Kohen. And this basically, people are wondering whether this is going to be allowed according to Rabbi Yossi, son of Rabbi Hanina, just as it's allowed where the Yisrael gives the money. So the reason for this possible stringency of a Kohen's law is going to become clear in a minute. So according to these commentators, the inquiry is about Rabbi Yochanan's permit to accept money from Yisrael, where the Kohen did originally intend to give part of the Bechor to this Kohen anyway. And they're wondering whether Rabbi Yossi, son of Rabbi Hanina, would accept this permit if one is giving the money, was going to be a Kohen instead of the Yisrael. Would they allow that? Would he allow that? So the Gemara says, according to some, Rabbi Zera did not respond to the questioners, but Rabbi Hiskiah said in the name of Rabbi Acha that he did respond, and this is what he said to them. And the Gemara says, according to Rabbi Yossi, son of Rabbi Hanina, in a case where this is a Kohen giving the payment to Yisrael, why would it be prohibited? So what's the worry here? The worry is that perhaps the Kohenim are going to be paying money like bribes to get the right away from this person to give it to a different recipient. So that's going to be an interesting issue because you're not allowed to sell tithes, and you're not allowed to make debt payments with tithes and things like that. So the Gemara asks, why would it be prohibited? And the Gemara says, is it not because this constitutes the appearance of wrongdoing? In other words, it looks like the Kohen is purchasing the Bechor, and it looks like you're purchasing tithes, and that's a problem. The Gemara says, consider Rabbi Yochanan also holds that where Yisrael gives a payment to a Yisrael, it's prohibited because it constitutes the appearance of wrongdoing. It becomes a Maris Ein problem. So Rabbi Yossi, son of Rabbi Hanina, is dismissing this concern. And then it must be true when you have a Kohen providing this as well. Rabbi Yossi, son of Rabbi Hanina, is saying that, look, it's okay if a Yisrael does it to a Yisrael, and it's going to also be okay if a Kohen does it to a Yisrael as well. It looks like somebody's buying tithes here. So the Mara Fulda says that the Gemara is extrapolating from this dispute regarding the Yisrael to the dispute regarding a Kohen. And just as in the case of a Yisrael, Rabbi Yosei, the son of Rabbi Hanina, is not concerned about the appearance of wrongdoing, neither in the case of the Yisrael nor in the case of the Kohen. So Rabbi Yosei, the son of Rabbi Bun, is arguing that this transgression that would look like it's coming to the Kohen's payment would look like it might even be more serious than if this was just coming from the Yisrael's payment. In other words, the idea is that it really looks like the Kohen is buying a tithe. It's like a bribe. And, if a Yisrael does it with a Yisrael, okay, whatever. That's, I think, what Rabbi Yossi, son of Rabbi Bun, would say. But it certainly is going to look like more of a serious thing when a Kohen is doing this. And the Gemara is going to reject Rabbi Zera's response. And the Gemara says, Rabbi Yossi, son of Rabbi Bun, says, there is an appearance here where the Kohen provides the payment of a desecration of the holy, and you say it is merely because of the appearance of wrongdoing. And the Gemara basically is saying that where the one paying is a Kohen, the sale of the Bechor constitutes merely the appearance of ordinary wrongdoing. But it's not. It doesn't just look like an appearance of wrongdoing. It's actually a possible desecration of the holy. So it looks like Rabbi Hanina would also agree that in this case, this kind of sale is going to be prohibited. In other words, they're going to be saying that, look, if a Yisrael does it with a Yisrael, that's one thing. But now when you have a Kohen doing it to a Yisrael, now it looks like they're buying the tithing, and it looks like a bribe. And Rabbi Yosef, son of Rabbi Bun, goes further than Rabbi Zera and says, no, it's not just the appearance of wrongdoing for why it's forbidden. It's actually because it's a desecration. You're desecrating tithes. So the Gemara is going to continue, and Rabbi Yossi, son of Rabbi Bun, gives a baraisa in support of his prohibition of this case, which would be the Kohen doing this payment to get the tithes. And, this is going to get into some very serious stuff, because we saw with Eli's children that there was some shenanigans going on with Kohenim getting benefits and tithes and things like that. And there's some Gemaras talking about how the Kohenim, in some of the days that weren't so great, were cheating with tithes and things like that. And so the question is, okay, if a Yisrael is coming and trying to influence a sale where somebody is coming and already going to do a tithe anyway, Rabbi Yochanan is going to allow it in that case, because anyway he made a decision on who specifically he's giving it to. And anyway, it's like influence. They're not going to count it as a sale. But over here, this case is now where you have a Kohen actually looking like he's going to go and buy this. He's going to go buy this right of the designation to give to whomever you want. And that's really going to be the problem, because now it's like you're buying tithes. And that's going to be part of the problem. So the Gemara is going to continue with Rabbi Yossi, son of Rabbi Bun's point. And the Gemara says, and furthermore, we see from this that was taught in the Baraisa regarding the Kohenim and the Levim who assist on the threshing floors. And it says what they receive is neither truma nor meiser from the owner. And if he gave them tithes, this is a desecration of the tithes. For the verse states, and they shall not desecrate the holies of the children of Israel. And they, those who give tithes in this manner, desecrate them. So this is coming from Vayikra 22:15. And basically, the Kohenim are assisting to help on the threshing floor and winnowing in order to secure the tithes for themselves. And basically what's happening is nobody can go and use this grain until it's been tithed. And so by the Kohen coming and helping to do it, he's unlocking the ability for the Yisrael to give the tithes. And what's he going to be doing? He's going to be taking the tithes for himself. And they're calling that a desecration of the holies. And so the idea is that by requiring the recipients to assist with the threshing floor in return for the tithes, which are Hashem's gift to the Kohen and the Levi, they're going to be running afoul of a deeper point here. Again, these are God's gifts to the Kohenim and the Levi. Everything belongs to Hashem. And you can't use something until you unlock it, until you do the tithes, and until you say brachas on the food to eat it. And so basically what's happening is you're taking away this right of the Yisrael to go and to give to whomever you want. And again, you have to keep in mind, these are Hashem's tithes. This is Hashem's gift to whomever he wants. So the Gemara is going to continue and talk about how from this brisa we see that it's forbidden to give tithes even to those who provide no money, nor any direct payment to them, but they're just going to help on the threshing floor. And even if they're not saying that they want to be compensated. So if that's going to be forbidden, surely it's forbidden to give tithes to a Kohen who's providing a direct benefit of money in exchange, like what Rabbi Zera's case would be. This is different than, as it's turning out, this is different than a Yisrael coming and trying to influence another Yisrael for a tithe. This is where the Kohen or the Levi is doing it. And that's where the Gemara is going to be pointing out this problem. So the Baraisa places a penalty on someone who transgresses this prohibition. And the Gemara says, beyond this, they said, regarding those who give tithes to Kohenim and Levim who assist on the threshing floor, their truma is not truma, and their meiser is not meiser, and their consecrations are not consecrated. Those are very strong words. And by the way, you'll see this as a parallel in Bavli Kiddushin 6b. Now, these tithes, although they're prohibited, are valid under biblical law. And the rabbis are invalidating these tithes as a penalty for desecrating the holies. And so the tithe produce is regarded as tevel by rabbinic decree and remains prohibited, says Rabbi Kanievsky, until new tithes are taken. So this is a very expensive proposition. In other words, they're saying that you didn't collect, what you collected at the threshing floor, Mr. Cohen, that's not tithes at all. In fact, you have to go tithe it and give it to someone else. And that ends up being very expensive. So why would you'd say, well, the Kohen can go keep it for himself. Not so fast. He has to go give it to a Levi. So he has to go through all the separation of tithes. He has to, so it's like he just was given tevel. That's the point. So he has to take out Meiser Shini. He has to take out all these tithes he wouldn't ordinarily need to do. And they're basically turning it into an expensive proposition and a penalty. And the Bryce is going to give a verse, and it's going to say regarding them, the verse says, condemning this corruption in Israel about cheating with tithes, where Kohenim are cheating on the tithes. It says that her leaders take bribes for judgment, and her Kohenim teach through a fee. And what does this mean? This is, by the way, talking about a verse from Micha 3:11, and it says that they teach Israel to distribute tithes not by disseminating the laws, but through a fee, and by paying a monetary fee to receive these tithes. And they're charging. In other words, the Kohenim are acting corruptly, and they're accepting money for favorable rulings, and they're forced into this mercenary behavior by, these people who are cheating and demanding that, in order to get help at the threshing floor, they're going to have to do it in exchange for tithes. And that's going to end up causing, losses of income. And they're creating like these mercenary bands where, they would come and they would be the only guys doing this kind of labor at this time. And they would sort of force other people out. And at this time, basically, it was like a gang of Kohenim that were there in order to collect the tithes. And it wouldn't be like normal workers there anymore. So the verse is basically saying that the Kohenim at this time would pay a fee. In other words, their assistants on the threshing floor. And this is to quench their thirst with beverages given as tithes. In other words, that, these are offenses that, they've basically created like a mafia where they're coming and they're unlocking the tevel, and they're unlocking it so it's not tevel, so the farmer can use it, sell it, get benefit from it, but they're chasing out everybody else at the threshing floor, and they're the ones that are sitting there now creating this like clique of Kohenim who are there and will only do the work if you're going to give them tithes. And it's basically like taking payment, and they're criticizing this sort of any kind of payment of tithes where you're cheating on this. And it's like a form of corruption. So the Baraisa is going to elaborate on the penalties that await somebody who is going to transgress this sin. So what's going to happen to these Kohenim who are behaving like mafias and cheating and things like that? And the Gemara is going to say it here. The Gemara brings upon them 3 punishments. These are for these Kohenim who are like cheating and acting corruptly. And it's going to be corresponding to 3 offenses of this verse that we see in Micha, where it's talking about, and her prophets divine for money. And the Gemara says, it is written, therefore, because of you, Zion will be plowed over like a field, and Jerusalem will become heaps of rubble, and the Temple Mount will become like stone heaps in the forest. In other words, this punishment fits the crime. And says Rosh Aurelio, by desecrating holy tithes, our holy places will be desecrated. By the way, measure for measure, this is where the Kohenim would come and collect all of the Beurim. They would come and collect their tithes. They would come and collect the first fruits, and also the bikurim and the Beurim. And basically, what would happen is that because they were cheating on all of these things, that Hashem destroyed the area where they were getting all this money anyway. Even when they did it in a kosher way, they got a lot of benefit. And so they had, very good barbecue, and they would get access to parts of the animal that they wouldn't ordinarily get. And, the Gemara now is going to talk about the dispute of Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yossi, son of Rabbi Hanina. And it's going to challenge Rabbi Yochanan from a Mishnah. The Gemara is going to say that a Mishnah contradicts the view of Rabbi Yochanan. And it says, if one betroths a woman with trumos, with maestros, with gift portions for the Kohenim, with chatas water, or with chatas ashes, she is betrothed, even though he is a Yisrael. So presumably, the reason a Yisrael can go and betroth a woman with items like trumos and maestros is that it will look like the benefit of gratitude privilege is a financial equity in the tithes. And it would look like you can use that financial equity in the tithes to betroth a woman. This, by the way, supports Rabbi Yossi, son of Rabbi Hanina, who's saying that this is a privilege that has monetary value that can be sold. Now, the Gemara is going to resolve this and is going to say, interpret the Mishnah as speaking about a case where the truma came to him through the inheritance of the maternal grandfather, who was a Kohen. And basically, this betrothal is going to be affected not with the value of the benefit of gratitude privilege, but with the value of the truma itself, which is entirely the property of the Yisrael. So the Mishnah poses no difficulty for Rabbi Yochanan. In other words, he inherited it. How did he get this truma? Well, he got this truma by, not because he has it because he didn't give it to the Kohen yet, because he inherited it. That's how he has possession of it. So the Gemara is basically responding to the fact that the truma in this case does not belong to the Yisrael, who received it as an inheritance from the Kohen grandfather. And although he himself may not eat this truma, it does have value to him. And the woman who receives it, and it can be sold to a Kohen. So you're allowed to take this inheritance and go sell it, and therefore it has equity. And so the case here is going to be, by the way, the same as a Levi grandfather. And you could also use that to go betroth the woman as well. But again, the question is, how did he get a hold of this truma? Did he get a hold of this truma because he separated out tithes, he just didn't give it to a Kohen yet? And Rabbi Yochanan's pointing out, no, he inherited it. And that's why he has this. So in the next part, we're going to be getting into more about these stipulations of giving tithes. And, it's so important to look at, honesty in Judaism and staying away from corruption and looking at the Gemara for what does Chazal consider to be correct behavior, correct thinking, and corrupt thinking. And, yesterday I was working on the very, very famous page 13 in Nida, which is talking about wasting seed and things like that. Anyway, I try to do the Shas, and I'm on Masechet Nida right now. And, it's talking about what is derech eretz, what is proper behavior, how is a Jew supposed to act, how is a Jew supposed to behave. And certainly with the tithes, going and, doing the tithes correctly if you're a Kohen or a Levi, and doing it where you're not turning it into a financial matter. And again, why is that? Because again, as a Levi or Kohenim, these are Hashem's, and these are Hashem's gifts to you. And this is not your property. This is something Hashem is giving to you. And so to corrupt it by going and making a mafia out of it and a game out of it and to, degrade it, that's something that ultimately there's going to be punishment for, and it's not proper behavior. Have a great day.